And we didn't find significant privacy and security ownership until the breaches in which CEOs were implicated, CEOs lost their jobs, and security and privacy became leadership and governance issues.
Almost every organization we've talked to has stood up something they call AI governance, a committee, a policy, a review board, a framework deck, a set of principles on a slide somewhere. Unfortunately, most of the leaders running these programs are not sure that the thing that they built is actually doing the work it claims to do. Ownership is the first question, and it's the one most panels stop at. We're going to start there, but the harder conversation is the one right after. What is governance actually for when somebody does own it? Are we producing accountability and not just looking at the attribution? Are we governing the model, or are we governing just the workflow consequences of that model? And how much governance is enough before the controls cost start killing the value AI is supposed to create? So I've got 4 of the sharpest people I know on this topic. Quick intros, and then we'll go straight in. We'll start with Bob.
So I am mostly a data governance guy who has a lot of strong opinions about AI governance, and I'll share that with you. I've written several books. I've written a book, Non-Invasive Data Governance. There's actually 3 different non-invasive data governance books. And then the most recent one's called The Data Catalyst, cubed, as in exponentially raising governance to the power of change management and data fluency. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today in terms of AI, is how we need to change people's behavior around how they govern all aspects of AI. So thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to being on the panel.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bob. Amy, up to you.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved hearing Bob's change of behavior. I am an attorney on the panel and a former chief information security officer, as well as a technology consultant before then. My primary areas of expertise are incident response, and as well as proactive security management and legal engineering. I am the chair of Lowenstein-Sandler's privacy, security, safety, and risk management practice. And I am delighted to be a part of this conversation because we need behavioral change and a real world understanding that these systems are going to be looked at for purposes of understanding the evidence coming off of them, because we have incident response and regulatory inquiries coming down the pike, and already against platforms, hundreds of cases that are percolating through state and federal court. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thanks for being here. Andrea, it's up to you.
I'm very excited to have this important discussion. I run operations and growth at Fourth Wave, and I'm the president for Canada for the Global Council for Responsible AI. I look at governance through the operational lens. Is how can we govern this technology to ensure that we can create sustainable growth that it's not going to lead us to the bad news on the newspaper because we didn't implement or we didn't embed into the design of this system, the corporate system, the right rules to ensure that we can move at the speed that AI is moving, which is AI speed. So very excited to have this conversation with all of you today.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. So I'm going to open this first question up to the group in general. Who owns AI governance? We have a lot of different types of governance in an organization: corporate governance, data governance, privacy governance, all these different governances. Who actually owns AI, in your opinion? Let's start with Amy.
Yeah. So I'm going to give the lawyerly answer of it depends. In organizations, who should own AI governance should be the business unit with enough power to spur behavioral change. In some places, that could be legal, that could be the CISO's office. It might be an operational control unit. The way you incentivize someone to own this function is do it by first indicating budget allocation, because usually people are more likely to take control of a function if they know that they will increase their technology or operational budget. So right now, I don't think we know exactly where it should sit, but if it does sit somewhere, it needs to sit somewhere with sufficient power to influence people within change management, project management, and user management processes.
How about let's hear from Bob on the side of data governance and the ownership of this. Where do you see how that falls in or ties into it?
Well, I was already prepared to answer the question of who owns AI governance, but I will answer that. I wrote an article on LinkedIn recently that stated that data governance and AI governance are not related. And of course, people yelled at me and said that was clickbait to get people to read the article because, of course, they're related, but they're not the same thing. So you certainly need to govern the inputs into AI. AI doesn't really care where it gets its data from anymore, whether it's structured, unstructured, semi-structured, audio, video, whatever the type of data is. And so I've been focusing more on AI governance being exactly, I think what Amy was saying is it's like everybody owns it. The people that are running AI projects within a specific part of an organization, I think we as practitioners need to do a better job of getting leadership to understand that governance is more of a mindset. It's not a specific project that you're going to do once. So I love the idea of being able to push out at least until we've identified a single place. I'm not sure there's a need for a single place for AI governance to land, to be owned. I even tossed out the idea of there needs to be a CGO, a chief governance officer, who's responsible for AI governance, data governance, risk governance, financial governance, all of those things. It hasn't caught on yet. I don't know of any chief governance officers anywhere, but I love what Amy said about the idea of it really needs to be the responsibility of everybody.
Fantastic.
And it's very behavior focused as to what you do with the outputs. We can govern the data going in, but we still need to govern people's behavior.
That's a great point. What do you think, Andrea?
Well, both of you have hit on a critical point. I agree with Amy and Bob that it's really multifaceted. And from my perspective, AI governance needs an owner who can enforce operational consequences and not just manage policies. I think workflow consequences are key and operational execution is absolutely crucial. And AI operating model owner is also very critical because at the end of the day, even though I agree this is a mindset everyone needs to own, at the same time, you need someone to keep accountable for to ensure that this operating model, this governance model keeps being updated at the speed that is required.
So this is a question back to you, Andrea. So if we're looking at building out these policies, and every company seems to have something, even if it's informal, and most of them are, we would consider incomplete from what we've seen so far. Why does it still feel like a lot of it's just in those policies and not really in the performance and really meeting the need of where we're at right now within the AI era?
Yes, so what I see is that most companies are stuck in what I would call the governance theater. They have these artifacts, they have the org charts, their risk registers, the ethic committees, but these often don't translate into real operational control or measurable value. Just to give you an example, about 1 in 50 AI investments deliver true transformation. And that's largely because governance isn't embedded. So the core issue is that policies are often treated as documents rather than enforceable structures. And that's what's leading to this AI governance void. Adaptive AI operating system. We as humans, as we are interacting with AI, cannot wait for the next policy to be understood by other humans in the traditional way we were operating. AI needs to be able to communicate this at real-time speed by this being integrated into the system that everyone is using. Think about it as a central nervous system that keeps being updated and keeps updating the humans that are using the system itself.
I'd love to just dovetail on what Andrea was saying, because we're also talking about AI right now as almost a monolith blob, which it's not. I've been advising in AI for 20 years. Banks, highly regulated institutions have been automating e-discovery. There are entities that have significant closed model AI with correlative governance. I think where we are concerned as a profession is generative and agentic AI. Our governance policies, even if you're highly regulated, are changing. Like, for example, in the financial services space, we have a fantastic AI risk management framework that is 4 components, one of which is 400 pages of what is demonstrative evidence coming off of telemetry of governance. So we are, I think, at a place where it's not like governance doesn't exist, because if you've ever seen a project management scenario in a highly regulated Big 6 bank, they have governance in spades. It's that our governance does not yet meet the problem that we are trying to address with generative AI and also agentic AI that can be spun up at the endpoint level within an appropriate CI/CD, within a robust system that might be outside of a product CI/CD, and also through lots and lots of vendor relationships where you might not be able to manage it so well. And on the incident response side of my practice, that's usually where we see a lot of the large breaches, are all of those various vendors that highly regulated and large companies use.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Because I wanted to play off of something again that Amy said. One of the things that you said is really one of the core tenets and ideas of being non-invasive in how you govern. Governance already exists. The first thing, I've given presentations at conferences where I've asked by a show of hands, how many of your organizations are governing your data or governing your AI? And nobody's like waving their hand in the air. They're not like excited, yeah, we're governing it. But I say, okay, put your hands down. Say, I'm going to ask the question again. I want everybody to raise their hand. And they look at me kind of weird. And I say, how many of you are governing your data and governing your AI? To some degree, you are. There's somebody there who has accountability. Now, again, like I said, we've got to switch this back. We've got to embed it into what people do. They don't need to think of it as something that is over and above what they're doing. And we've got to get that message clear to our leadership that, you know what, we're already governing. We're governing informally. If we can move from informal to formal, we can move from inefficient to efficient. We can move from ineffective to effective. We can move from inconsistent to consistent. And it's all a matter of kind of removing that informality around it. And so people are scared of it. I just think, as Amy said earlier, too, it needs to be owned by whoever. Organizations don't seem to have strategies and plans to do AI as an organization. It seems to be happening in pockets. So they need to understand that each of those pockets need to understand the governance around that and need to be responsible for it. It's already happening. If it's not happening, then there's something wrong in your organization.
Yes,
That's good.
yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to add that formalization is going to drive efficiency, because it means that we are going to be embedding these practices into operational workflows and technology platforms, and that will improve efficiency, improve consistency, and effectiveness. I'm looking at everything from an operational standpoint and how this is going to drive growth and avoiding legal challenges going forward. So totally agree, Bob.
Yeah, I also, by the way, want to read both of your books. But I will give the lawyer point of view, which is whether or not actual governance is happening, the evidence of a lack of governance can be used against you in a court of law and before regulators. And to Bob's point, you have pre-existing user management processes at the endpoint level, change management processes, project management processes, product deployment, CI/CDs. There are going to be pockets, especially if AI is a part of those processes, that will be a natural fit for add-ons to an existing governance. And if we are creating completely new processes instead of not slightly transforming where we already have at least those governance structures, it also will be difficult to document and have a handle on how AI is embedding into operational processes.
Yeah, so I'm going to put another question to you, Amy, and this is an interesting one. We've talked a bit about how there are already governance models in play for different areas in our business and that we're using for both our technology and our corporate and our risk and all these other different our data. Are we at a point where AI can actually be governed right now with just the market and the technology?
So not yet. And I'm going to be honest, because data mapping took us a long time to get right. And some individuals still aren't getting that right and have what I call the 1999 problem. The problem that was here before the millennium of nobody mapped their data network. We're having that problem on steroids with AI decision surface mapping. And that requires, as we learned in data mapping, both the mapping committee and the resources to map, as well as automated crawling, discovery at different levels, endpoint, cloud capture, and also within a product CI/CD. Also, we don't yet have fully embedded the full telemetry of stack visibility that we need in order to effectively govern AI. And I am mapping the current product stack of what products provide visibility at the governance level, at the node discovery level, looking at security posture management. And we're putting through 8 separate domains and may add a 9th because one product does not fit all. And vendors like to market more than what their tools are capable of. We wanted to provide a little bit of an independent evidence-based evaluation of if you have the tool in place, this is the evidence that's coming off of it. And by the way, you need to feed it properly so you understand the evidence coming off of it.
That's great. So does everybody agree with that we're not ready to govern AI yet? Anybody have a different opinion?
I'm going to let Andrea go first. I always have an opinion.
Awesome.
So my experience is showing that governance is already happening, but informally, as Bob mentioned before. We do have this AI governance void that needs addressing now. What I mean is this gap is the space between AI adoption and effective control. Waiting basically for the perfect telemetry or complete tooling means we are leaving significant risks unmanaged. So we can let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we need to focus on executable models. And what I mean by this is the critical piece right now is translating policy into operational reality. And that means embedding controls within existing workflows and defining clear decision rights rather than relying on standalone committees. So there is a level of governance. It's just not fully there yet, the level of governance that we need.
Awesome. How about it, Bob?
Andrea's talking about embedding it into the operations. And that to me is really the only way that it's just going to become a natural way of doing business. I mean, it becomes part of people's job. It's not over and above what they're presently doing. So you asked the question of, are we at a point where AI can be governed? Well, I think it really depends on the aspect of AI that you're talking about being governed. Because it could be the inputs into AI, it could be the data that's feeding it, it could be the outputs that somebody's governing or looking at the outputs. I know somebody said the other day that they live a half a mile away from a car wash, and they asked Gen AI whether or not they should drive or walk to the car wash, and the car wash told them to walk. because they were lazy. So, they walk your way there and the car's not even there with you. Somebody's got to be governing the output. Somebody's got to be governing the behavior associated of the decision authority and the decisions that are being made about it. So I think we're at a point where it has to be governed. I think it's actually, the governance is taking place very informally. It's at a point the leadership needs to understand that we need to be a little bit more formal with it. And I think that's where people are going right now.
The way that I see it's going to be embedded into operations is throughout this AI operating system that my co-author Timothy Stockstill has been working on for a while. So based on our experience, this is how the system is going to become a reality. We just cannot rely anymore on the traditional way of governing a technology because, again, the speed at which things are changing does not allow for the traditional model of governance to be successful. So, yes, it needs to go through operations, but it's a different way of operating. It's the way of the AI operating system.
Well, if I can dovetail on that too, because it really also matters what technology you have employed and what type of AI you're doing. So take, for example, a user level company that's just worried about agentic endpoint AI. There are elegant solutions at the browser level that perform DLP and input management, like Magic Mirror and other startup and established companies that help us do that endpoint blockage. There are more robust tools. For example, IBM has Watson X that it is paired with its more substantial government tools to actually do some of the mapping, inventory, and also policy as code. We could walk through many different great tools like Sierra and others. The key thing, and I think to harken back to what Andrea said earlier, is governing at the speed of AI. What does that mean? We need policy as code. So as you look for tools and you're looking for governance, you definitely want to make sure that you are embedding policy as code, because human committees do not operate with the speed with which harm occurs. And as you are prioritizing governance, because you're not going to be able to do everything at the same time, prioritize human safety, sensitive applications, and sensitive individuals who can be harmed, like the elderly, children, consumers. Andrew, the checks in the mail, because you keep making these excellent points that are great to dovetail from. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good. And actually, it lends very well to generative AI, because generative AI is an iterative platform. So in our governance efforts, we need to make sure that we are also iterating instead of trying to map perfection like we did in privacy and security 20 years ago, where we couldn't do everything as governance all at the same time. And we just had to start somewhere and map out our influence and get better and better and better at it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, those are some great points. And I want to get back to how big of a problem is this, like overall in an organization? Because we're talking about a lot of really good concepts on what we might do to help govern within an organization, what we need to change within our business processes. Well, how big is this problem? And we'll go to Amy for this.
I'm going to say again, it depends, but let's start with where it is really big. There are over 1,000 cases against social media platforms and chatbots that involve safety. I know many of which many know, but that's a problem with the B in front of it. So when it's a multi-billion-dollar problem and you're a big organization, big resources have to come to bear, and you're not going to apply compliance like a rounding error. One very concrete example is the Daenerys Targaryen case, where a kid unfortunately fell in love with an AI-based chatbot, and that chatbot slowly did not dissuade him fully, even though it gave him continual warnings about his want and need to commit suicide. That's a big problem. There are a lot of other problems that will be large if you're heavily regulated, if you are critical infrastructure, and if you have the ability to process a lot of personally identifiable information. And heavily regulated and a lot of PII doesn't have to mean a big company. That could mean middle enterprise that typically has a lot of PII because it can be operating as a service provider for Fortune 500 companies. You're at risk. So for many companies, I think, is this a big or a small problem? Let's
Yes.
put it out first. And it may be a small problem that can be addressed at the endpoint level if that's where you are. But if you're servicing lots of data, a potential safety risk, and you're servicing big companies when you're a smaller company that might not be able to take the hit that your competitors are asking you to, it's a problem that you've got to map it so that you understand it within your organization.
Sounded like you had a reply, Bob. How about it?
Oh, I don't have a reply. I just say, is it a big problem? I think the answer is always it depends. But I just spoke to a major retailer earlier today who is aware of 15 separate use cases of them using AI. And when I ask questions about are they related? Do they know what each other are doing? Is there any consistency in the things that they're doing? And the answer was, well, I guess he laughed. So I guess I knew what the answer was when he laughed. So there's not consistency. Yeah, there's problems that are strewn throughout AI. Okay. I think that the fact is that, again, there seems to be a lack of strategy and plan for organizations. If there is an individual, or I think somebody needs to be recognized to oversee and to govern the use of AI within an organization, that means they should be aware of the 15 different efforts that are going on. They should be aware of what the inputs are, what the outputs are, what the outcomes are from using AI. So I'd say, yes, it's a big problem. It needs to be addressed. It's not going to be addressed by the end of this podcast. That would be a great thing if we could do that. But I mean, again, we've got to change the mindset to, again, I love the idea that we've got a legal point of view on this. I love the idea that it needs to be embedded and that people need to kind of build this into the way the company operates. It's not something we're going to solve quickly. And it's something that, again, we need to change the mindset of our top executives. They need to know what the risks are. They need to know what the outcomes are.
Sure. I think too, though, as we look at this, I always like to think of incentives and motivations. So budget is a huge incentive to get somebody to own this, to get somebody not to just say, I'm not it. What is another motivation is AI is going to fundamentally change payment processes that at least I grew up in incident response through the 2000 to 2015 years of payment card breach after payment card breach after payment card breach. Talk about years in which lawyers wanted to cry. Those were it. We are at the precipice of being back there. Just in the news just 2 days ago, Claude is investigating its Mythos preview that might have been released to unauthorized actors. And Mythos has the ability to discover zero-day vulnerabilities within code. And in the preview write-up that Claude, gave to the public, it indicated that in some of their tests on established enterprise systems, they found hundreds of zero-day vulnerabilities. That should be shocking to any person, even without security knowledge on the line. Very, very important. This has the ability to fundamentally change your security trajectory. So somebody has to own it. Please make sure that you're including the CISO in those conversations. Please make sure your CISO and CPO are AI cognizant, because if someone else owns it other than those two offices and the general counsel, all three of those entities need to work together to enable and help the owner and incentivize the owner. But nothing motivates people more than money. So find a monetary way to nudge people into ownership, discovery, and processes.
How much do you feel that
Josh, yes, I
Go
want
ahead.
to jump in. Can I add to this, please?
Yes, please.
So I think we have a massive problem at hand. We are driving this Ferrari at an increasing speed without the right telemetry. And in some cases, people don't know if the brakes are working. So this is a massive problem. It's becoming bigger day by day. We are behind this rush for gold and growth without clear accountability. Who is the owner of the AI implementation? Who is the owner of these governance systems? How are these governance systems going to move and evolve and upgrade at the speed of AI? Organizations are not able to answer these questions. Therefore, I see this as a massive problem and gap.
Yeah, and so I see ownership of this being very cross-domain and cross-functional. If you're looking at decisions, delegation, the risk, and the controls that are involved with an agentic system, I can delegate a agentic system with a decision for it to be able to do something. Who's responsible for that? It's partially me because I delegated that and I provided it. I know that it can make those decisions. But on top of that, if something goes wrong, what about the people that are responsible for that risk? And what about the people that are responsible for that control? That goes across domains. Do you agree with this position? We'll give it to Bob.
Ah, I don't know that there's anybody in an organization right now to be in position to govern everything over AI and the entire organization. That being said, it may be important to find somebody to do that anyway, meaning that they need to be in tune with what is going on across the organization. It can't if in fact there's not going to be an owner, and I kind of shy away from the use of the term owner, but I guess in this situation it's pretty accurate. Somebody who owns what's happening with AI within the organization, I'm going to go fall back on what Amy had said, is it all depends. I mean, it could be finance, it could be risk, it could be anybody, it could be none of those. It could be somebody who has responsibility for AI as a shared service across the organization. It doesn't need to neatly fit into one of the fingers of the glove that exists right now. So organizations, while they're trying to determine where it should land, should take that into consideration. Maybe there's somebody that should have their finger on the pulse of what is happening all the time. Do they own it? I don't know.
If I might augment that a little bit, though, just with some security and privacy history.
Okay.
The whole adage among lawyers is whose throat do I need to choke? And we didn't find significant privacy and security ownership until the breaches in which CEOs were implicated, CEOs lost their job, and security and privacy became leadership and governance issues. So I think because we don't have an owner, because given the AI, generative, closed models, agentic, and I will put agentic off because we need to talk about that separately. Because there are so many places where AI can be injected, leadership at the top needs to own it and needs to disseminate how do I operationally execute within my organization. And they have to know in the event that there is a throat to choke, guess whose it will probably be with the absence of a proper owner. Because that is what we learned in privacy and security in the early 2000s and mid 2010s, and what we still know now in modern incidents where there's not a proper owner of those functions.
We're talking about roles and we're talking about the human aspect of it. There's a recent study that just came out that 44% of Gen Zers are actively sabotaging organizations' AI initiatives. My question for that is, how should governance, when it comes down to you have internal people that may not be trained properly or understand the technology in the way that the organization wants to go with it? We'll start with Andrea on this one.
So I think this goes back all to leadership and ensuring that your organization has a vision about what is the human element in this new AI era. So I have run sustainability, for example, for different Fortune 500 companies, and millennials and Also, the Gen Zers are very interested in following leadership that embeds sustainability into their vision, and it's just an integral part of the DNA of the corporation. This is not any different. They have concerns about how this technology is going to be used. What's the future that they have in this particular organization? So first, you need to have a clear vision and mission, and you need to explain what is the future of those humans in the company in this AI economy. Then you need to educate and empower your people. AI should not be replacing humans. It should be augmenting our capabilities. And that's a critical aspect of how are you going to inspire your organization to follow you. At the end of the day, it's about leadership and it's about clarity. And one other thing that I would strongly recommend is open this up for them to provide feedback. What are their concerns? Why are they not following the use of the processes or using a particular technology? Make sure that you are listening to your organization on a real-time basis. The final point is they are going to provide feedback if they see that based on the information they are providing to you, you are taking action in the right direction. So words do not mean anything if there's not action behind them. Listen to your people, listen to them, ensure that they are part of this change, and ensure that they have clarity about what your vision is for them in the future so that they bring their best self.
Yeah. I might just add the shameless Generation X perspective because it's our generation back to the rescue. Because the interesting piece of, at least in the legal profession, what we have found among our users and among the governance policies that we have set up is it's experienced employees who are actually innovating in AI. Like we expected in the legal profession, the young to be the primary drivers of AI-based technology. But it is those who are more experienced who see processes and can see how to automate them. So it's the partners in our law firms. It's the senior business executives who are becoming the power users. And that is incredibly interesting to me. And I believe exactly what Andrea has said is that we've got to motivate our young because yes, there is fear that their job could be eliminated because of AI. But if you don't learn AI, your job's probably going to be eliminated sooner. So the motivation and retraining aspect of this is not something, you know, that you can sit in the corner like a toddler who's angry at their parents and not learn. You have to be properly introduced to the ability to automate your work stream and think deeper. So with my own associates in the legal field, we have started to do large-scale research projects that we have never done before because we now have LLM-based access. And let me just give you a super tiny little example of it, but it's super cool. I now have data when someone, a large company, has a data breach of 100 different breaches and a sentiment analysis of the words within the public release that were included in that public release and the resulting press cycles, and each iteration of company public release, how that press cycle occurred, because usually there's several cycles of press. I can literally go to a CEO, CPO, and CSO, say this, don't say that. I can do that because I've done enough research with Edgar and related press cycles with 4 major large language models to be able to undertake a sentiment analysis I never could 20 years ago. I just wouldn't have had the power. That's how we motivate our young, is we get to think deeper and risk mitigate even more. And our job is just going to make us smarter if we enable use of technology.
That's a great answer. We're starting to run low on time, so I have one last question for the panel. 60 seconds, no more. 3 years from now, we'll look back and realize we were governing something completely wrong. What is it, and who will we wish had owned that? We'll start with Bob.
Jeez. Oh, that was the question I really hoped I didn't get. 3 years from now, God only knows where the technology is going to be and what we will be able to do with it, good or bad. 3 years, I guess we'll look back. I don't think we'll look back. I think we'll probably say that it should be exactly how Amy and Andrea talked about it. It needs to be leadership needs to own this. And if leadership didn't step up, then I think you'll find that the organizations that are successful, they're the ones that leadership did step up and say, you know what, we're going to understand this better. We're going to embed this into the culture of what we do as a company instead of dealing with it as a one-off. I think that's where we'll probably be. I don't see it being a whole lot. I don't see the ownership being distinct at that point.
All right,
I
Andrea,
could
you're
be
up.
wrong. I could be wrong.
So 3 years from now, we'll look back and realize we're governing the wrong thing entirely. That's very scary. Well, probably we'll have focused too much on models and data, while the real challenge was in the operating model and human judgment preservation. I believe we'll have measured activity instead of value and relied on documents instead of enforcement and allowed people to de-skill. That's very concerning to me, that people will be de-skilled as systems became smarter. So at the end of the day, those would be the consequences of poor leadership, of thinking only about the short-term gain instead of the sustainable growth that we all deserve. So if we don't want to do that, I think we need to move from performing governance to operating it by embedding the intelligence of the collective in the process.
fantastic. Thank you. All right, Amy, you're last.
I'm going to end on hope because that's where we all have to be. And I think most people have a committee and they have tool sets. And 3 years from now, the committees will get smarter, the tool sets will get smarter and consolidate. We have an overwhelming amount of AI-based tools and an explosion of that marketplace. How you can make your current committees successful is by taking an evidence-based mindset to governance and actually pen test where you have key heavily regulated AI and you anticipate there to be negligence or strict liability. And by the way, there are AI components like in products liability where there's strict liability. That means you don't actually have to prove harm occurred. That's a big issue. But if you take an evidence-based mindset and at least you're walking into a regulator or into a courtroom with the fact that you were able to collect knowledge and manage it, even if the tool wasn't completely fed properly, at least you've tried. It's reasonable in a negligence-based scheme. And if there's strict liability, sometimes at least effort and significant business interaction can lessen the likelihood of damages, even if it can't reduce the ability to have a ruling against you. So I think if 3 years from now, people develop an evidence-based mindset to AI and think about this is going to be the telemetry and systems that prove negligence, prove harm, and prove whether or not I belong within a regulatory investigation, we'll be in a good spot in 3 years and we'll just keep getting better and just keep iterating.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you all of you, Bob, Amy, Andrea, for being a part of this. This was the conversation I hope we had, and this really went well. To everyone watching, if this one landed for you, don't miss episode 3 of The Real Operating Model, and subscribe wherever you watch so you don't miss it. And if a specific piece of this hit a nerve, send it to the person on your team who needs to hear it. That's how these conversations become action. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.